Hello, I'm Anthony Magnabosco, and I'm pleased to welcome some of the biggest names in atheist circles to an insightful yet casual discussion on the various ways believers and non-believers interact. Our discussion tonight is entitled Engage or Enrage, a Nuanced Discussion, which will last for 1 hour and is being recorded, so it will be available afterwards on our social media platforms. The four of us will ignore the chat for now so we can focus on the discussion. But if there's interest, some of us may stick around for a brief after show where we can address some of your questions. Before I let our guests take 2 minutes each to introduce themselves, I'd like to quickly go over our scheduled topics. Discussion topic 1. What are our goals when speaking with believers? Discussion topic 2. What are the pros and cons of our various tactics? And number 3, is it disingenuous to change tactics when speaking with different kinds of believers? And now for our brief introductions, which we decided on alphabetical order. And because it may be relevant to the discussion tonight, let's each try to include a super brief explanation of how we became atheists. So that will be Peter Boghossian, Matt Dillahunty, Joshua Kelly, and then back to me to kick off the first topic. So we'll start our introductions with Peter. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. I've been working since 4:30, so I'm a little tired. I have to say that was a great introduction, very professional.
I practiced it all day long.
The poinsettias are a nice touch.
I wrote it 20 minutes ago.
So you want to say how we became an atheist?
Yeah.
It's always been rather silly to me, but I became active because I've taught philosophy for, I don't know how long, decades. And I was in a unique position of asking people why they believed what they believed. In fact, that was literally my job, to help them reason through problems and clean up their thinking. And I came to the conclusion that most people don't have the faintest idea of why they believe what they believe. But when it comes to religion or faith or things, beings in supernatural realms or what have you, there seemed to be a rule that the more tenaciously one holds a belief, the less evidence one has for that belief. And so, to make a long story short and end my introduction, I realized that there are some pretty basic tools from philosophy and cognitive psychology and cult exiting and drug and alcohol counseling that weren't being used, that could be, to help people who are suffering from faith-based delusions. So that's how I got into it.
Thank you, Peter. And Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Dillahunty. I host the Atheist Experience TV show. I do a bunch of debates and lectures. I'm a somewhat quasi-professional magician, but I am a professional atheist now and have been for the last year, supported through my Patreon project, which is great. I spent 25 plus years as a believer. I walked down the aisle at a Southern Baptist church when I was about 5. And around 30, 31 is when I kind of found my way out of it. At the time, my goal was to become a minister, because that's what I thought God wanted me to be. That's what my family thought God wanted me to be. And after working in the tech industry, I said, I give up, God. I surrender. I'll go ahead and do this. And I spent about 1.5 years in kind of serious prayer and study. And my roommate at the time was an atheist. I was looking for a way to convince him so that I didn't have to get to heaven and have God say, why is this man who you love like a brother burning in hell because you never bothered to do your job? And without ever having a conversation with him about it, I managed to kind of reason myself out of it, thanks to the efforts of many, many, many thinkers who came long before me and were vocal about it, which is, I kind of felt a duty to be vocal about it as well, got involved in the atheist experience, and I guess the rest is history.
Thanks, Matt. How about you, Joshua?
My name is Joshua Kelly, and for those of you who don't know, I am the author of the book, Oh, Your God, The Evil Idea That Is Religion, which has its new edition coming out in January. I've also been graciously and gratefully asked by Peter and Anthony to contribute to the upcoming app Patheos, which thus far the betas look fantastic, so good work on that, guys. And the upcoming book 666, which takes a bunch of chapters on various positions of theism and atheism from notable writers, including Lawrence Krauss and Richard Carrier and Douglas Wilson. And that should be out sometime next year. I don't think I was ever. I don't think I could have ever been called an active believer. I was certainly a passive believer when I was a child because that's what I was told. I went to church with my friends and I went through the motions because that's just what we all did as kids. And so my loss of my passive belief wasn't schismatic. It wasn't dramatic. I just kind of fell out of it as I went to school and read more. And so there wasn't a huge definite transition in that I am no longer a believer because I don't think I could have ever classified myself as a believer. So the shift to non-believer wasn't really defined.
Well, that's interesting because it was pretty similar for me too. I was raised Catholic, but I was always skeptical. And I just never believed it even as a little kid, but I never thought about it too much until my kids started getting older and I started being asked questions from them of where do you go when you die and why is Johnny telling me that I'm going to hell and all this stuff. And that's what made me started to identify as a non-believer. So I think I always was a non-believer and the transition wasn't all that drastic, but it wasn't really until I started being influenced by Peter Boghossian and Matt Dillahunty, which if you can imagine being influenced by them and being able to talk to them tonight is just a huge special treat for me.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of where I'm at. What I do now is I go out and I take many of the techniques from Peter's book and I apply them in practice. I record the results and I put them on my YouTube channel. I'm a member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and I recently started a weekly blab with my friend James, and we're on every Wednesday, and the show is called Doubting Confidence. So I'm a little bit comfortable now in the blab arena here, but I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to be with all three of you guys today.
I feel the same.
Right. So let me repeat the first topic here, and then perhaps we can have Joshua lead us off. So the first topic is, when we speak with believers, Joshua, what are your objectives?
It's a combination of a lot of things. Mostly I believe it's rather selfish of me. Mostly it's to profess what I think and feel, because I think that in order to have proper dialectics occur, we need to have the positions stated outright. And so honest discussion continues from there. And then it would be excellent. It'd be great if either of our minds are changed in the course of the discussion. That would be ideal. I would love that, and that has happened before many times. And then I think no matter what our positions are, approaching them honestly and without pretense, I think is the most important thing, because otherwise these discussions have a tendency to become masturbatory, and that should be avoided if at all possible.
Are you out to deconvert? Are you out to insult? Are you out to what would you hope to get from a conversation with a believer?
Both,
just generally speaking.
Both were necessary. I think deconversion, the idea of helping somebody change one's mind, is a hugely important goal. But when you're discussing faith, it's not always necessarily discussing faith as an abstract or having a discussion with the faithful. I think that's a really important distinction that needs to be made out the gate. But if I'm talking about faith, there are various elements of it which deserve insult, which should be insulted, because it is an element of the moral facets of those discussions that should be illuminated. If I'm attempting to deconvert a person, which I don't know that I've ever actively intended to do, I don't think that either deconversion and insult are mutually exclusive or mutually inclusive, depending on who you're talking about. I know that was a little bit of a vague answer, but it was hard to stipulate where to begin.
Matt, you talk with so many people. Do your objectives change when you speak with believers? Is it always the same objective? Where are you coming from?
Well, I think I've got a long-term objective, which I've said on stage, is I want to change the world. I want to get rid of irrational thoughts, be they superstitions, religions, pseudoscience, whatever, in whatever way I can. There are also, though, short-term goals, and this is about, I'm in kind of a unique or unusual situation in that I do a call-in show, but I'm not necessarily trying to change the mind of the person I'm talking to, because I don't think that is likely, at least not over the course of a call. I'm just trying to do the best job I can of showing of moving them as much that direction as I can for the people who are watching. The idea that there's an audience out there, and we know that when you see someone who holds the same beliefs that you do for what you think are good reasons, and you watch them embarrassing themselves, not me embarrassing them, but their arguments are getting shot down. Those people at home feel that, but they haven't been sat in the chair and been put on the stand, essentially, to where they haven't offered the public defense of it. So that gives them the safety to reevaluate those positions at home. It's about they empathize with the person you're speaking to. Now, I've had one-on-one conversations outside of the show with either street preachers or email or people, friends and family. And my biggest goals there are, number one, I don't want anybody to say they've never met an atheist. I don't want them to be able to say they haven't met an atheist who was able to give an account for why they don't believe. I don't want people to have never been challenged on their beliefs. There is, though, a selfish component to this for me. It is, I desperately want to know, and I think that people believe for different reasons and they're going to find their way out for different reasons. I desperately want to know what it is that allows two people to look at the world with pretty similar information and even pretty much agreement on how we would go about finding the truth, and end up in polar opposite positions. And so all of these, thousands or tens of thousands of conversations that we've had over the years in the TV show, it just kind of keeps feeding into my head of, this worked here, this didn't work here, this didn't work here, this worked here, this got a weird response, this person shut down. There was a street preacher in Australia that I was talking to. By the time this 5-minute conversation is over, I thought somebody had reached out and flipped an off switch on the guy because he's just standing there staring at me. And I had to reach out and say, hey, are you all right? And he's like, oh, yeah.
What puzzled them?
So we had this, I basically had countered every one of his positions, and he could not come up with anything. And then he just said, well, we just disagree. You're really good at this. Bye-bye. And walked off. Now, I don't know what's going to become of him. I don't know if he's eventually going to change his mind. I don't know if he's going to ever look into it again. But he definitely can't say that he's never met an atheist, that he's never met an atheist who would give an account for why he doesn't believe. And he's definitely been challenged on his beliefs. And I've told people, if you come away from the TV show or a conversation with me and your faith is strengthened, I'm at least happy that you were willing to consider it. I think something has gone wrong. I don't know where it's gone wrong, but I think something has gone wrong. But I'm at least happy that they were willing to have the conversation, because there are many people who go their entire lives without taking any sort of inventory of what they believe and why they believe it. And the why is the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah, so you really have three audiences. You have the person you're speaking with, the non-believing audience, and then the believing audience.
Yeah, the non-believing audience, I'm not overly concerned about. People will write in, saying, "Oh, we really like it on the show when you do this or this or this." The show isn't ostensibly for atheists. If they get anything out of it, I hope that they learn from the things we do right and the things that we do wrong, and they're able to have better conversations. But the atheists who are just tuning into the show because they want to see me hang up on somebody or watch a theist make a fool out of themselves, or me, demolish the Christian, destroy. I don't care if they ever watch again. It's a side effect that people might be amused by that, but that's not the goal.
How about you, Pete? What's your objective when you talk with a believer?
Listening to Josh and Matt. Do you go by Josh or Joshua?
Joshua, I prefer, but I don't care either way.
Joshua and Matt. I think, in one sense, it's much less ambitious. I'm just genuinely curious as to why people believe what they do. And I really want to try to figure those things out for myself. And I think that there are consequences of that. I like how Matt framed that in terms of kind of a tiered or a structured system. So it's just born out of a genuine curiosity. I think the problem is, so Matt has a tremendous amount, for example, of anecdotal evidence, and he can see what works and what doesn't work. The problem, and I don't necessarily, I'm kind of looking at some of the comments on the side here, part of the problem is that we need to look at what the evidence says. And unfortunately, the evidence is pretty scant, as I read about in my book and other places, public talks, is that we can't conduct interventions and publish those in a formalized way because it's not yet at this particular time considered socially acceptable. So we're pulling from our anecdotes, and there's nothing wrong with that. That can be effective. But I think we need to look at what the literature says and then act on that, act on what that evidence is. So to rewind one notch, it's born out of curiosity for me. And then when the curiosity manifests itself in these conversations in different arenas, and then I like to look at the evidence and then hone that process to then help people.
Well, I think measuring the impact of a conversation is a very interesting topic that I would love to delve deeper into some of their point. Like, how do we measure it? What's a success?
It's vital.
What's a failure?
It's vital because
we need to get to that point where we can measure a success.
Yeah, if you don't do that, then there's no way to keep your own delusions in check.
Yeah. And my thing is, I like Peter was saying, I have a lot of anecdotal evidence. I also, like, one of the things about public access television that we used to do, now we do it from our own building. Nobody tracks that. Nobody has any way of knowing how many people are even watching it. And then you can try to determine how many people are watching on YouTube, but none of that matters because you don't know how many people are changing their minds over this. And all I know, my measure, it's difficult and it's kind of off the cuff. But when I go to conventions or lectures or debates, the number of people who come up and say, hey, I was a theist until I'm an atheist now because of your show, as that seems to increase, that lets me know that we're at least being effective. Because I can say with, no ego, because I'm not the only person involved in this in the slightest. I've got inbox full of thousands of messages and have met in person thousands of people who have changed their mind because of what we've done in the show or the debates. But that doesn't tell me much, because how many other people listened and didn't change their mind? Maybe I'm only 1% effective.
Right.
No. What Pete was saying about it not being socially acceptable, I think there's actually another aspect to this as well. An intervention is something that you would stage when you have clear consensus that something is harmful or untrue. And in many cases, when you're talking about the God propositions, you have an unfalsifiable proposition that people are generally convinced is either harmless or good. And so it's not even whether it's socially acceptable. You're actually kind of going in direct opposition to, you couldn't say what you believe is false and harmful unless you can actually demonstrate it. And for most people, what they believe may not be easy to demonstrate that it is either. I have relatives who are kind of benign believers. They're nowhere near the Westboro Baptist Church. They're not radicalized. Their beliefs may be doing harm to them that nobody can actually identify. And so I think some work has to be done to show kind of more of the secondary and tertiary effects of, if you believe these religious claims, how is this actually affecting your decision-making processes in other areas that we could show are harmful?
Is that a required step before you even start the talk? Or, I mean, most people, I think they run into somebody at the car wash. They're not going to spend a little time to verify that the beliefs they hold are harmful to them. They might just launch right into a debate or a discussion with them.
I think I was talking more broadly there, because Peter mentioned, that we need more research. And I think that that's at least one of the areas where, you might be able to, lots of different avenues for attack. But but look at what you're dealing with. You're talking about the Catholic Church, for example, is not the only one with a child rape problem, but it does have that. And yet that alone has not managed to wake people up to this idea, which I think is true, that the Catholic Church is not a force for good. It is barely qualifies as anything more than a business which is protecting its assets, irrespective of whether its supernatural claims are true. The Catholic Church is bad. And instead, they will just say, oh, but look at the charity work it does. And, hey, they're trying to fix it. There's this rationalization process that is the church is trying to protect itself and the people are trying to protect the church. And I don't know how bad something has to be before they wake up.
Well, to go back to Peter's original point, it seems that the objective of trying to measure the transition from faith to non-faith or vice versa is, I mean, to put it simply, really difficult. And so when I work, I know that that's not something I try to keep at the forefront of my mind. And I know that goes back to the original question you asked also, Anthony. I prefer to think of the national discussion or the global discussion in terms of faith as a large, open arena, which now, thanks to the internet, it is. And so sometimes the best thing one person can do is to state their truth as loudly as possible and to become Parrhesiastes for a type of morality or methodology or framework which they believe best exemplifies truth. And so for me, I know that when I write a book or an article or when I participate in a discussion like this, my attempt is simply to state my truth as loudly as possible. And then if that affects people, that's fantastic. And if not, then I feel as though I've done some good by contributing to the common discussion.
What do you mean by state your truth as loudly as possible? What does that mean?
Well, so like when you are to write a book saying, for example, that there is no God, you may not know who reads that book. You may not know whose minds it changes. You may not know what its overall effect is, either for good or for bad, but you do know that you were compelled to do it. You do know that you felt it was for the good. You do know that it needed to be done for your reasons, and that you went through with it. And sometimes, I mean, when you're not dealing with the micro level, like Anthony speaking one person to the next, when you're dealing with a much more broad audience, like posting something on the internet without having any ability to measure who it influences and how, sometimes the need to do it is enough.
So when you say state, you're talking about in writing then?
Or in speech, like here, or on Anthony's television show. I mean, or on Anthony's YouTube channel, or on Matt's television show. Sure. So just so that I'm clear, Dan Dennett has this wonderful thing in his new book about paraphrasing back to people so that you're clear. It's a nice little technique to use, since we're talking about techniques, so that you know that you understand. So I want to know that I understand. So right. When you're speaking to somebody in a one-on-one conversation, you state your truth as loudly as possible, and to you that means... Okay, so to state my truth, I wouldn't say as loudly as possible, but to state my truth with clarity and with certainty.
Okay, then I misunderstood. I thought you said loudly as possible.
No, I'm not talking about appealing to obnoxiousness.
Okay.
Peter, you've talked with a lot of people. What works and what doesn't with these various approaches? That's our second topic, and we're closing in on the halfway mark, believe it or not. So we should move on to the next topic here. So you've talked to so many people, Peter. What works in your mind? What doesn't?
You're talking about one-on-one interactions, or macro scale?
Let's go micro for now.
I think modeling the behaviors that you want to see. I think listening works. You have to understand what people are talking about. You have to understand what they mean by certain words and how they use those words, because if you don't, you're just like two ships passing each other in the night. So there are some minimums. It's also easy to conceptualize this question in terms of what doesn't work. Screaming at someone, calling them a creatard or what have you. I think it's in each individual with their personality and styles, they'll find things, or they'll find a groove for what works. But I think that there are some minimums, like listening, defining words, and meeting for motivational interviewing, meeting people where they are. So when I'm speaking with someone, I speak to people. I wouldn't speak to my academic colleague in my department in the same way that I'd speak to a person on the street who isn't steeped in academia. So you just have to find out where people are, and then speak to them in a way that you can understand what they're saying, and then they understand what you're saying. That's the only way you can have a conversation about anything.
I kind of do that with my kids, like especially when they were young. The best way, apparently, to get through to them is to get down on your knees and look them right in the eye and get down to their level and talk with them. Is that more or less the same thing of what you're talking about?
I don't know. You know, I was
The meeting them where they're at.
I was thinking, it's just so hard to overcome this idea, and that's why I think debates are really a bad idea. It's so hard to overcome this notion that you need to show someone you're right. You need to if you use a big vocabulary word or something, you're really trying to show people you're smart, or that you know that they don't know, or that you know and you're special person. I mean, it's really hard to overcome a lot of those mechanisms of the ego and really have a sincere conversation with somebody. It's not an easy thing to do, but I do find that those conversations that are born out of sincerity yield far more fruit than those that are not.
Matt, would your show be less exciting if you took a more, I don't know, that meeting them where they're at approach, or?
I don't know that I don't. So one of the things is that we've had this conversation for years now about diplomats versus firebrands, or however you want to actually categorize it. And I've been labeled both. I get emails talking about how that people believe in God because I have the patience of the saint. I sat there for 45 minutes and hand walked someone who was clearly not really understanding the issues very well, walked them down. I think the Socratic method is absolutely the best tool, to the extent that we could claim there's a best tool, because of how it works. You're asking them questions. They get the impression that they are leading themselves toward a conclusion rather than you trying to beat it into them.
Absolutely.
It has been the best conversation, during debates and on the TV show. It's amazing to watch. Some of the best clips of what people have highlighted is where we just sat there and asked questions, and when they answered them, and you could visualize the light bulbs starting to peak up, and then either they shut down, or on some occasions you'll hear them go, "Oh, wow," and they realize they've reached the end of this. In the past couple episodes of the show, we've had a couple of theists call, including a pantheist. We talked to this guy for maybe 20 minutes, something like that, and by the end of it, he was ready to reconsider what his views were on God, because he eventually came to understand that the reasons that he had for saying that the universe is God could apply to anything. And if your idea, if the foundation for why you believe something applies equally to things that you do not believe, now you are in a state of cognitive dissonance. And if you can get somebody to recognize and care about whether or not their beliefs are true rather than whether they're comfortable, then you have a win. I hate looking at it in terms of win-lose, but I mean, that would be a win if your goal is to convince people. If your goal is to have, the kind of conversation that makes people think.
Yeah, can I just jump in on that real quick? It's interesting. Sorry, Joshua. It's interesting that I went to David Silverman's lecture. He came to Portland, and it was about firebrand atheists. And I don't consider myself a firebrand atheist at all. And after listening to him, I thought I needed to reevaluate my own position. Maybe I am a firebrand atheist. One of the things that I think people mistake or confuse, and Matt, I think this rings true with when you first started to speak, is that people confuse being forthright speech. Okay, so so I'll let you finish that or take it.
Anytime, if you're direct, if you are not necessarily trying to coddle someone, if you're a little too forthright, or if you're a little too passionate, then you get labeled as a firebrand. My key thing is I'm addressing people, or I'm addressing ideas and not people. Yeah. If I'm attacking something, I'm attacking an idea. Now, these people hold these ideas, so they're treasured and dear, and they are almost synonymous with their identity, and that causes problems.
That's exactly right.
But if and this is why, you end up looking like an ass, because, you pointed out, that's a stupid idea, that's moronic. And so there are certain kind of challenges that I've kind of scrubbed from my on-air vocabulary over the years, because I know that they're immediately recognized as if I was addressing the person, even if I'm not. And my wife actually fixed one thing And that was, she got me to stop saying, at least as an opener or an immediate response, that's an argument from ignorance. Because to people who aren't familiar with the fallacy, you just called them stupid. That wasn't your intent. You weren't addressing them. You were addressing their argument. They just don't know the fallacy, and all they heard was the word ignorant, and it puts them on the defensive. I don't want to put people on the defensive.
Exactly.
I want to put up a
Here's my question, because this whole thought experiment seems to be framed in the context of a one-on-one discussion. The question I would have for Peter or for Matt certainly would be, what about your audience? What if there was a person who in your audience whose mind was not made up, but through your use of the phrase argument from ignorance, who understood the term, had their mind changed? And so suddenly the idea is that we're not always just dealing with one person on a one-on-one interaction. We're dealing with audiences of people, and in certain situations where you might have to take it for granted that you can't change the mind of the person to whom you're discussing, you might change the mind of the many people listening.
I think
the thing is, you can change the mind of the people the person that you're speaking with, and I think my videos are a testament to that. And you can see Matt just related an experience where he's changed the person's mind. So we know that it could happen.
In many cases it can, but there are plenty that it can be done. 3 weeks ago, I was having lunch with Douglas Wilson. And I'm sure you three know of him, but for those watching who don't, he's the renegade pastor who conducted a series of debates and wrote a books with Hitchens several years ago. And I find, as many people do, some of his positions absolutely reprehensible, morally speaking. This is a person who has come to his faith through what he believes is a solid philosophical and logical process. This isn't a person to whom we could sit down and by reasonably asking him about his positions, he would come to change his mind. He's used those positions to make up his mind initially. And so perhaps at the end of that discussion, what is there left to do except hold him accountable for his moral conclusions? And perhaps, or somebody like him, perhaps, I don't know, a leading member of ISIS or somebody who is equally radical in their faith and holds sort of positions that we would find morally reprehensible, what do we do except to call those positions immoral and ridiculous and backwards and perhaps wicked?
I think that's an option, and I'm in favor of it. I'm on the record of saying that ridiculous ideas are by definition deserving of ridicule, and I think ridicule has its place. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the only option, because as soon as if I'm having a conversation with somebody, and we get to roadblock after roadblock when we're talking about the specifics of their beliefs, I divorce the specifics of their beliefs from the conversation entirely, and instead have a meta-level conversation about the methods that they use to reach those. And if I can show that the methods that they're using would also reach other conclusions, that demonstrates that there's a problem with their methods. If I can show that the methods that they're using aren't sufficient to actually reach a conclusion, then that can be useful. And even though analogies are always going to fail, arguing by analogy has just been the death knell of people who thought that they had a rational basis. And when you've done that, the next step from them most of the time is just an appeal to faith. Well, you just got to take faith or direct experience. I've had things happen in my life. One of the things that I had to learn, and I've hung up on lots of people, and I think most of them for good reasons, is when to end a conversation. Because trying to do it all in one go is probably too much.
Certainly.
And what you might say is, okay, now that we've got this and we've got we've at least agreed on this point, why don't we take a break and think about it some more? We'll have another conversation later on and begin where we left off. This is something I'm going to try and do with Blake Junta, who I've done a couple debates with.
Sure.
So
I want to just I just want to be sure it's very clear. Street epistemology, I find, is a remarkably effective tool, and I think it's hugely beneficial. I think that goes without saying, by the way, and just in case I wasn't clear about any of that, and that the types of Socratic methods that you guys are speaking of are self-evidently useful. Just in case that I hadn't clarified that earlier. Sorry for interrupting you, Peter.
No, not at all. To answer the first part of your question about if someone does know the argument from ignorance, do you use it? Again, that's the motivational interviewing of meeting people where they are. Something that I took from what you said, kind of an inference that I make is, So let's just assume that you're correct for a moment. Let's assume that there are some people. Just accept this by fiat for 3 minutes.
Okay.
That there are some people who are absolutely incapable. Their mind is made up. They're resolute. They have no hope whatsoever. They're incorrigible. It's a complete waste of time to talk to them about anything. Any conversation you have just strengthens their belief, which is like Ken Ham or something like this.
Right.
I think, again, this is all very hypothetical because I don't actually believe that myself. As Jerry DeWitt, John Loftus, and others are living examples of why that's not true, but just accepting this for the purpose of conversation. Then the question becomes, well, how many of these people exist? I don't know, but let's say the number is 20%, which would seem to me extraordinarily high, but let's just say what that is. So that leaves 80% of the people. The 80% of the people, those are the people with whom we should be having conversations. That's a type of triage with our time in which it's kind of a reverse triage, in which we hit churchgoers, we help everybody else live lives of delusion, and we say, you know what, we're going to make a kind of a tactical assessment here, and we're going to realize that there are some people, and again, I don't believe this is hypothetical, there are some people who are just lost causes, and we're going to help everybody else. All right, I know that that's a lot to say, but I want to say one more thing directly addressed to Matt.
That's great.
Matt, when you said, I think you're right on, you talked about personal identity being a problem. I think that is an enormous issue when people make their faith-based beliefs part of their identity. And I have interventions that I've designed to separate identity from belief. In other words, to instill doubt in that mechanism of belief so that it can drive a wedge between any faith-based belief one has or any belief one has and one's identity. That's a conversation for another day, but I think that that's a really, really important topic that at some point we should perhaps explore in more depth.
But you've already just used tonight some words, Peter. This isn't a criticism. It's just you've already used some words tonight talking about how some positions are delusional and some positions are ringing with untruth. And already,
I don't think I said ringing with untruth. But
no. That was my paraphrase. Sorry, But I mean to say, like some of the positions that you've already said tonight would be in the ears of many of the 80% you've just talked about radically offensive and firebrandish. And already tonight, I mean, if there are probably theists who may be watching this discussion who would decide that your position is not one that they would be sympathetic to hearing because you've used words like that. My position is simply that using words like that is okay because they're true.
Yeah.
Well,
go
ahead, Matt. No, Matt.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, there were people. I'm not overly concerned if I know that I've done something honestly and that I've addressed ideas and not people. And I tend to be pretty cautious with my words, and I'm more and more will go out of my way to try to make sure I'm not offending people. If somebody it claims that they're offended because of something I said, which was honest, which was not intended in that way, I don't worry about it too much. Partly because I'm speaking to a broader audience most of the time. There was a woman who called to desperately tell us how we needed Jesus. And we had this lengthy conversation, and at the end of it, she kind of had nowhere else to go. So she did this, what are the rules here on language?
You can say whatever you want.
Okay. So we get to the end of the call, and she's like, well, I guess I just believe what I believe, and you believe what you believe, and that's all fine. And I was like, well, then why the fuck did you call? And the fact that I dropped an F-bomb, not at her. It wasn't like I said, fuck you. This was just an expletive to kind of amp up my frustration of, we just had this big conversation because you thought this was important. And then when you couldn't make your case, now all of a sudden you want to say it's not important. But she used the fact that I used an expletive as an excuse to paint me as rude and run away from the conversation. And I don't mind one bit. That clip lives on forever, and people can see that she was clearly terrified of continuing the conversation, and that was her give-up gesture, that it was easier for her to paint me as the bad guy, ignore all of the content that we had just discussed, and focus only on the style of a single word that was separate from the content we discussed. So I'm not too bothered by that.
Yeah, I'm not even remotely bothered if I think I have a position that's well reasoned, and I articulate that position, and people. There are several issues here, but people have substantive disagreements with those. Look, the other thing that I want to say is I only have so much time in my day, and I'm 49, and most of my life is behind me rather than in front of me. And if somebody wants to make a substantive criticism of the ideas, in my book or things that I've published, there is a game, and the rules of the game are: you publish in a journal, and then you get my attention. Don't think that you're going to blog about it and tweet about it. I don't give a shit. I mean, great, you go and be with all your buddies and honestly, I just don't care. But the larger point is that in the conversation, in this context tonight, I've been speaking to you guys as equals. I'm not conducting any intervention on you. This is not the same context as when you're doing street epistemology. So I think context matters.
What I think is worse than insulting somebody in a conversation is not even having the conversation in the first place. But what I've run into, I've had so many attempted conversations with people, but as soon as they learn that I'm an atheist, the defenses go up, largely because I suspect, is because they've had contentious arguments with atheists in the past, and they expect to get that from me.
Yeah.
And that's, I see that as a fallout from the more aggressive approach. And if I could just, I know, Matt, you mentioned that you never had a talk with your roommate. You found your way out on your own. And I admire that. But I wonder if that roommate was willing to speak with you, which approach would you prefer? Would you prefer the more in-your-face debating approach, or a more subtle Socratic approach?
And this is where I'm going to have to get back to the point that I made before we even started, which is I'm not convinced this is a real issue at all. If you would have to draw,
what's this?
The distinction between engage or enrage.
Okay.
Because I've had people become enraged while I was engaged, and vice versa. In order to make this a real thing, you'd almost have to go to, let's pick out the internet video that only mocks, and compare that to the kind of accommodationist who just wants to not. I mean, that's the extremes. Everything else, this is all about knowing your audience and having a conversation. And the question that Anthony asked me about, what would I prefer? This is something that I like pointing out to believers about the golden rule, and that's that Jesus' version in the New Testament is crap, because it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, maybe they don't want to be treated by you. I would prefer to have honesty pretty directly. And I am the type of person that if you're addressing the argument and not me personally, I can tell the difference. There are other people who don't want to be treated the way I want to be treated, and a better version of the golden rule is to treat people the way they want to be treated. And so when you're having these conversations, if you're running up against outrage over and over and over again, chances are you're just an ass. Chances are so I do this because I care about what kind of world I live in, and because I care about the people that I'm talking to. If I didn't think they could possibly change their mind, if I didn't think there was something productive that could come from the conversation, I would go play a video game or play a guitar or something, anything other than wasting my time in there. I don't think it's a waste of time. When people were talking about, maybe it's 20%, I agree there are probably some people who aren't likely to change their mind. The thing is, I don't know how big that demographic is, and I don't know how to tell them apart until I have a conversation with them. So I'm going to have the conversation with anybody who's willing, and I'm going to constantly adjust the conversation based on the type of feedback that I'm getting back. If I'm getting body language that tells me that somebody's starting to get edgy, it's harder to do on TV when you only, maybe you might only be doing it over the phone, but you can hear certain things. You can watch where their eyes go. And then when you can push, and when to pull back. And the last thing, just because I saw somebody kind of address it, was I had mentioned when to stop a conversation. And in my opinion, the best time to stop a conversation that's gone on for a while is at a point of agreement, because that makes them want to come back and have another conversation. The last thing they have in their mind is, at least we agreed on something. Let's see if there are other things that we can agree on while talking about what we disagree.
Certainly. And that brings up a really excellent point. Perhaps the title of the discussion tonight should have been changed to Enrage and Engage. But I think there's the pivotal difference here that we're kind of getting to is that I don't think anyone in this discussion is advocating that when we meet a Christian and they say, I'm a Christian, we respond with, well, hey, you're an idiot. I don't think that's what anyone is, or hopefully anyone watching wants to say. But during the course of a conversation, if a Christian or a person of whatever faith you're talking to happens to elucidate a piece of their faith that is radically immoral, and they say it is the tenet of my faith that women should be submissive to men, it is not, I believe, an undialectical or an out of bounds position to then respond with, that's a sexist position or that's an immoral position, for the fear of shutting down the conversation.
Okay, so I hope that this isn't a can of worms that's going to take us off on a tangent. Give me that sexist thing again, or racist thing again.
If somebody in the discussion I'm having with them about their faith is to elucidate a piece of their faith that says women should perhaps be subservient to men, for an example, I don't think it is an out of bounds response in the course of a discussion or in the course of our publishing or in the course of our broadcasting online to say that's a sexist position. And what do you think that does by saying that? Well, here's what I know it does to me if somebody were to tell me that my previous action was sexist. I certainly think about why and how it could have been. And I'm not to say that a more passive or a dialectical approach wouldn't lead me to the same position.
Yeah, but
I know
that's only because you care about being sexist and racist.
Certainly.
Okay, so what would make you think that somebody who is a sexist or a racist, that saying that their position is sexist and racist would somehow, I mean, I don't understand what you think that accomplishes.
Well, first of all, one, it may not be the case that they understand that their position is sexist or racist. Or two, it may not be the case that they care, but the people watching, listening, and reading might.
I think we just moved into SE.
I'm just gonna let that one. I'm just gonna let that one go.
Just let me jump in here. We have 11 minutes before the end of the hour. It's gone by really quick, and I want to spend the last 5 minutes where we can tell folks what we're up to, how they can reach us, that type of thing. So, in the last 5 minutes, we do have a pending topic, and maybe we've touched on it a little bit here. I'll just read it, and then you guys can decide if you want to address it or not. Is there anything sneaky about mixing up approaches based on the kind of believer you're speaking with? And the first thing that comes to my mind is a Muslim. Would any of the three of you approach somebody different because of the belief that they hold?
Because of the contents of the belief?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's say it's still a religious belief, but it's a different denomination. It's a Scientologist, it's a pagan, it's a Muslim.
So or an extreme of those faiths, perhaps.
Not only would it not change how I'd approach them, I'd even approach someone if they told me that my sewer needs to be cleaned. I'd ask them how they know that. I mean, I wouldn't change my approach one iota, with the exception being if I was speaking to someone who was particularly young and unaccompanied by an adult. That would be the exception. But in terms of content of a belief, no.
What about an older person, elderly?
No, I made a mistake once, and this is how I became friends with Emery. I was giving a talk in California, and there was a guy in the audience. And are you laughing, Matt?
I was going to make a joke. Was it a mistake to become friends with Emery?
He's
become
a friend.
Hey,
and there was an older gentleman in the audience who was around, 85 or something, I'm guessing, and he asked me a question, and I really gave him a horrible answer. It was a terrible answer. I was embarrassed by the answer, and I did it because of his age. And Emery called me out. We went out to dinner, and he said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, the guy was old, and I feel bad for him." And he said, "Never do that. That is the worst form of ageism and discrimination." And it was just a huge light bulb for me. He was just absolutely right. But even beyond that, I respected the fact that he was so forthright with me and so blunt with me, and I learned a valuable lesson. But that kind of gets back to my potential point of contention with Joshua. It's very similar to the arguments against the moral landscape, Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape. Look, if somebody doesn't buy into well-being as a starting position, if someone buys into, Islam, surrender, well, there's really an incommensurable position there. And so it's not clear to me how pointing those things out to somebody, I think that shuts down the discussion. I think that is almost definitely not the right way to go, unless you know something about the context that I don't know, or the psychological disposition or the attitudinal dispositions of the person. Because many people might even take that as a badge of honor and then go deeper within their beliefs. So I think, especially in today's day and age, we need to be extraordinarily careful and not capriciously sling around any kind of sexism or racism with regard to one's position. And I see this over and over and over again. And I think we need to be very, very judicious in our use of claiming that something is sexist or racist, because there are people who experience genuine forms of sexual harassment and racial discrimination. And every time we fling out that's sexist, that's racist, I think that demeans those experiences, those lived experiences of people. So I would caution you and everybody listening to be very careful if that is to either that, or it would have to be so grotesquely conspicuous, and you would really have to have a solid reason for doing that. I just think that it's something that we should reflect on.
Well,
Matt?
Go, Matt.
So I'll ignore most of the last part of that, except to say that a lot of people don't understand the difference between explicit and implicit racism, sexism, whatever else, and should probably spend some time looking into that. But on the issue of whether or not you'd change tactics, or is it sneaky? Sneaky, there's lots of ways to be sneaky. I mean, I think arguing by analogy is sneaky, but I don't find it in any way to be dishonest. I think that in fact, it might be one of the most honest things, because you have to get them to disengage from, oh my gosh, this is my belief, oh my gosh, this is my belief, into, hey, let's talk about this other hypothetical, and then show how they're similar. So, I've had conversations where people are like, oh, well, that's a trick question. How can it possibly be? I mean, I understand that you weren't expecting it to get there, but that's the point. It's not a trick in the sense that it's dishonest. It is a tool to let you see that you have been engaged in self-deception. And I try to, for example, I have a niece and nephew. My goal has always been to talk to them like they're real people, whether they are or not. And I only have the conversations with the people who want to have the conversations. I don't go door to door. I knock in, hey, have you stopped believing in Jesus? I can help. I don't make outgoing calls on the show. I engage with the people who want to be engaged. I don't force anybody down and force them to watch the debates or the YouTube channel. I'm looking at this as if my audience, whether it's one person or thousands of people, is someone who wants to be involved or at least watch these sorts of conversations. And I'm going to treat them like grown-ups. And if you aren't ready to have your beliefs challenged, then by all means, stop watching, move off until you are. Because it's time to talk to people who are serious about this, people who care about whether or not their beliefs are true, more than whether they're comfortable, or whether, so people will ask, well, what if your grandmother's on her deathbed? Are you going to go in and tell her she's not going to heaven? No. But if she asks me if I think she's going to heaven, I'm going to tell her I don't think so. I don't have any reason why would I lie to her? She already knows I'm a godless heathen. We've had that conversation. And if we hadn't, that'd be a different scenario. I don't know if I'd start the conversation while she's on her deathbed. Of course, I don't know what it would cost.
I think the difference for you, Matt, is that people call in to talk to you. I'm getting
a little bit of an echo, Pete.
Yeah.
Echo?
Yeah.
I'm still getting an echo.
Me too. You can try refreshing. But before you go, I want to say we've got 4 minutes left, and I wanted to give each person 1 minute to plug their stuff. Let us know what you're working on. if you guys are game, I'm willing to stick around for a little bit to do an after show. I can keep the Blab open. Maybe we can take some questions from the audience. But let's go in alphabetical order again. Pete, let's start with you if there's no echo. Can you tell us what you're working on? What's coming up?
Test.
How can people reach you?
Test.
You're good.
Okay, excellent, cool.
Perfect.
So what am I working on? Well, it's been a labor of love, as you know. You've been integrally involved. I'm working on an app that's come out that's with the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. It's called Atheist. It's at atheist-app.com, and it has really been, I will be blunt and tell you that I would not have done this if I had known how much work it was. This has been an I could have written literally 2 books in the time it took me to make this app. So that's a big thing. And then I have I'm going to be on the Joe Rogan show this week and the Dave Rubin show, the Rubin Report coming up, and then Emery's show. And then I have some pieces coming out in Russell Blackford's book, and James Lindsay, my writing partner, and I have just written 2 more pieces, one about Donald Trump, believe it or not, and one about why it's important to study math and science, especially if you're a philosopher. And I have a few other pieces out there too. John Loftus's book just came out, wrote the forward to that, and Lindsay's book just came out. I wrote the forward to that. And then I got so much stuff going on. I don't even know what I have going on. But
You're making us look bad, Pete.
The app is the big thing. That's really been, as you know, Anthony, the app has really been time consuming.
It's going to be huge. I can't wait for it to come out. Do you have an exact date yet? Can you tell us when?
No, but we're going to do a soft launch. I don't know if I was supposed to announce this or not, but we're going to do a soft launch, meaning we're not going to do a hard launch is when you have a date and you advertise, etc. We're just going to make it available on the iTunes store maybe in late December, and it's cross-platform too, so it's for Android devices and tablets and such. And we're just going to get the feedback and trickle it in, and then hopefully implement new features like users. It's literally a guide for everyone to study exactly what anybody of faith could say to you on virtually any topic. I mean, there are tens of thousands of fields. It is an epic undertaking. So, and we're going to put a new feature in. Sorry, last thing, but people can write in their own questions. Sorry, that was way more than a minute.
No. Go ahead. You're making us look bad. Okay, Matt, what have you been up to, man? You got 3 videos coming up?
I can, and I will be able to hang out for a few minutes at least after this.
Oh, fantastic.
I've been playing
Fallout. I was actually, before you get into that, I was thinking the perfect solution for addressing this open issue between Joshua and Peter might be to do another show. If there's some love, if people want to do that, give us some applause, give us some comments, let us know if you like this format. Okay, Matt, sorry about that.
Everything you just said I ignored the moment I heard Matt say Fallout.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Matt, that is the best thing ever.
Yeah, so rather than derail this into a discussion about Fallout 4, I actually posted about it on my thing. So I have 3 videos that I'm getting out next week. I'm working my Patreon channel. All the content's available for free. If you feel like supporting it, support it. If you feel like watching it, watch it. If you don't want to watch, that's up to you. The videos I'm doing a debate review of a debate I did with Jay Lucas. It was actually my second big debate at a university. So that's 2 videos, and the third one is actually this idea of borrowing from the worldview. I am taking fewer speaking engagements and debates next year because I was gone all of this year, like 3-4 weekends a month at least, including Australia. I loved it. I would never complain, but I'm working on a book called If I Were God, and
wow.
It requires that I spend more time actually writing than just traveling all over. Also, Atheist Experience TV show, and there will also be a special kind of podcasty sort of thing that is a spinoff of the Patreon Atheist Debates project. I haven't got all the details sorted. We may end up using something like Blab, where I pick out a theist and we just have it out. And I'm trying to change the nature of debates because normally I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, and it's like a joint press conference, to quote from the West Wing. I prefer state your position, and it's also backwards, like 20-minute opening, 10-minute rebuttal. That's obviously backwards because it takes longer to respond to something than you can make a million assertions quickly. So what I'm trying to do is state your position, and then let's have a conversation that is moderated, where we get roughly equal time, but we don't have to be incredibly, picky about making sure that it's equal, and set it out there for the world to see. Because my favorite part of all the debates is the cross-examination period, where you get to watch someone have to think on their feet, and that lets you know who is regurgitating information they got from some book, some apologist, some philosopher, and who has actually thought about these things and can give an account for why they believe, or is willing to say, I don't know, when they don't know. And that has frustrated the crap, as Anthony will tell you, out of many opponents. We had the debates in San Antonio, and I said I don't know so many times that they started bitching about it from the podium of their own church.
That's a classic video. If anyone wants to dig that up, you need to see that. That's with the Church of Christ in San Antonio. You said you have a limited travel schedule. What about the Reason Rally? Are you speaking there? Will you be there?
I will probably not be at the Reason Rally. I won't. I can't say for sure. I will probably not. I'm just not sure it can fit in my schedule right now.
Cool. How about you, Joshua? What's going on?
Like I said at the beginning of the Blab, the new edition of Oh Your God, the Evil Idea That Is Religion is coming out from Pitchstone, who I know that Peter's published his manual for creating atheists through. They're really great people. They do great work. So I'm excited for the new edition of that to come out.
Congratulations.
Clear.
That's a big
Thank you.
Impressive.
Thank you very much. Clear away some of the cobwebs of the past. Of course, I'm just as excited as Peter is about the upcoming Atheist app. Peter was nice enough to ask me to write the argument against a moral God in the app, and it looks fantastic. Everything that I've seen from the betas and the improved editions coming out look fabulous. So I think people are really going to enjoy it, and the app's going to change a lot of minds. It's going to be fantastic. We're also waiting at some point for the release date for a new book called 666, which was put together by a young man in England who decided it would be a really cool idea to get 6 atheists and 6 theists and have them write 6 chapters debating each other on 6 different subjects, ergo the title. And I was asked to write the chapter on the philosophy of atheism. Lawrence Krauss wrote a chapter. Richard Carrier wrote a chapter. Douglas Wilson wrote a chapter. John Windsor, a few others. So it looks like it's going to be a really nice compendium of people's work, and I'm looking forward to that coming out as well.
Excellent.
I'm also applying for PhDs if anyone's watching and interested in having me in their programs.
Which state would you prefer?
I'm sorry?
A particular state? California? You want to stay in California for that?
I'm living in Washington right now, finishing my Master of Arts degree.
Washington.
But okay. I did just submit my application to Stanford on the 1st, so fingers crossed.
Nice. Okay, so I've got a lot of videos. I've been out pretty much all the last 3 months, nearly every day, chatting with believers. I'm sitting on a lot of interviews that I'm eager to get out. So I have a lot of editing to do. So watch for those. You can go to my YouTube channel, which is Magnabosco 210. I generally tweet a link to those videos, so if you want to follow me on Twitter at Magnabosco, you can. And I want to spend a little bit more time the first quarter of this year thinking about aftercare, because we're starting to see inroads from what street epistemology is out there to do. We're seeing people lowering the confidence of their belief. And I think we need something in between those conversations and recovering from religion, so a place where these people can go to engage with possibly other.
I cannot state how important that is. That is just, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That is just, I hope when people are listening to this, that we can think about this. That's what we should have another conversation about, because that is.
I think let's dub it street epistemology 2.0 or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, but I think these people, these folks, these humans, they're just like us. They need a safe place to go to, a landing spot where there's people that have gone through the same journey that they have, and I'd like to spend some more time focusing on that. So thank you guys so much. That was a great discussion, and I'm blown away by the projects that you guys are all working on. That's so inspiring, and I haven't heard about any. A lot of that is all new. I haven't heard of any of that until just now, so thank you for sharing that. And I'm completely fine continuing with the after show. We can stop the recording now, or we can keep the recording. We have so many people watching right now that would, I'm sure, I'd love to take a question or two.
I'm happy to.
Pete, are you able to stick around, or
Yeah,
how are you feeling?
I've been up since 4-ish this morning, so I'm a little under the weather. I am curious though. What are those little circles that are bubbling up there?
Those are people giving you applause or props or something like that.
It's kind of like a heart or an applause. It's an indication. It really means nothing. Like there's one guy just clapping away like a maniac on mine. But typically it means that they like what you're saying, or they're fans or something like that. So don't take it personal if.
And those are the numbers. Is that
That's sweet of you. That's sweet of you to say, Anthony. Considering I'm in last, I appreciate it.
Come on, guys, give Joshua some love. I find it a little distracting. I think, Matt, if you were going to do a show in this medium, it'd be cool to disable that. But this is cool. This is cool. When this is all said and done, because I started the Blab, I get an email with a link to it to download the video, and then that could be uploaded to a Dropbox. You guys can do whatever you want to with it. I don't mind editing it and doing all that work for you, and then making it available for you to upload to your own YouTube channels or whatever. We can discuss that offline.
That'd be fabulous.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you guys for the chat, and Joshua, thanks for your contribution to the app. Really appreciate it. And Matt, it's good to see you again. It's been since INR 5.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day. I was like, I saw him at INR 5, and then we haven't seen each other since.
I know.
On the little applause things, I could see where this could actually be useful if it were more like a voting mechanism. For how during the speeches they'll have a bunch of people and they'll rate how highly people think of certain things. This is that, except without
Frank
a timeline.
Luntz. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, the questions off to the left, on my screen at least, people can star those, and I think those bubble up based on which one's more popular. But I think it's a little bit different than what you're suggesting.
I'll let you field the questions if you want, Anthony. I prefer you pick them.
Okay, so Billy is a huge proponent of street epistemology. He's been on Blab for the last 4 to 6 months, conducting interviews with theists in this medium. And shit, his question just disappeared. Let's see if I can find it. I'm sorry, Billy. Can you ask it again? I want to get to your question. He's going to ask that real quick.
Yeah, the questions, I don't see anything other than answer question and X. So I'm not seeing any way to bubble it.
You are a host, I think.
Yep. Oh, it says no. I'm no. Yep.
I just added you again. Shoot. All right. Let me start closing some of these out here. I'm not the best when it comes to managing these questions. Also, while we're doing our thank yous, there's 2 guys in the chat who have been dropping links to all of our stuff throughout the entire conversation. It's Reed and Lucas. So thank you for those guys as well. Okay.
Also,
I'm a Christian. I beg your pardon?
Dargendorp did something amazing, and I want to make sure he gets credit for it. He can go ahead and post the link again. He basically scoured the internet for every talk and every debate that I have ever done that's available on YouTube or anywhere else, and compiled them together, this set of links, and it's at tinyurl.com/thematlist. And I don't keep track of my own stuff at all, and it has turned out to be incredibly useful. As I was going to go back and do debate reviews, I went to his list to find out what the hell I had done.
That's fantastic.
That sounds like a timely endeavor.
I should also say, because they've been supporting this Blab as well. The good people on Dan Errol's blog, Danthropology on Pathos. Definitely go check out their work. I write there sometimes. They're fantastic. I know that they're watching, and they've been spreading the event for this around as well. So they deserve thank you too.
So people are suggesting that I could just scroll through the questions with my mouse, but that doesn't appear to be working. That was the first thing I tried. Yeah. And audience, in order to submit a question, just type /Q and then your question, and then I'll try to get to those, or you can actually type out the word /question, the whole word. Okay, I'm just getting hit with so many questions here. It's becoming... okay, this is a great question. Let me just copy this and paste it before it disappears. Okay, the question is, do you guys also find that the extremely high production value of both this Blab and the atheist experience has added to the legitimacy of atheists? That's obviously for you.
What an interesting question.
What'd you say? You got...
I don't know that the production value of the atheist experience has been anything to applaud about. My goal is, now that we're doing it from the building, we've bought some decent cameras. We just got approval to get an expensive phone system, which is designed for call-in radio shows. It's what you'd find anywhere else. I want to get us to the production value of the Young Turks or anybody else who's doing high-end stuff, so that if there was a period of time where the Atheist Experience was done on my couch in my apartment. So I think that they might be being a little ironic in that question.
Oh, another question just popped up here. Do you think it would be a better approach to use a Socratic method to reach the core of a belief, but then use a more Enrage, or I'm thinking probably a debate or a fact-based position to clarify something wrong that a believer might say? Maybe that's good for you, Pete. Like, at what point, if any, do you shift gears from street epistemology and then start presenting them with facts?
I actually would love to hear Matt's answer or Joshua's answer to that, because I have my own, as you know, I have my own stance on that. Joshua,
I don't think you necessarily.
Go ahead.
I don't think you necessarily have to. If you do it right, I mean, using the Socratic method, you can inject facts into the questions that lead them towards this. But I think probably the time to, if there is a time when they are most useful, it's when you are clearly, you have the facts on your side that you can point to in something that you know they are going to be forced to agree with. Because then it becomes kind of another question on its own, which is, if you don't agree with this, why not? Why is it that you think that all of science is some conspiracy to hide the truth of, UFOs or, whatever their thing is? But I think you could do it with almost all with questions. I think you might never have to actually make a statement at all.
I think that's particularly interesting. I think it's right, and I also think it's interesting because, we keep this ideal that we hail as the most effective and necessary, being the Socratic method, comes from a guy who not only gave us that method, but who wasn't afraid at the same time, even when defending his life, to speak exactly what he thought and to use the terms that came to his mind that weren't exactly flattering or particularly supportive. I mean, in the Apologia Socratica, he still brings down the masses of people who were accusing him. And so Socrates gave us this fantastic method for which to uncover truth, but he didn't mind speaking his own either, even when it wasn't exactly as passive or as engaging as it might otherwise have been.
I think the gentleman that asked the question about the production value of both Blab and the Atheist Experience was being sarcastic. So he probably agreed with you, Matt.
Not ironic, my bad.
Well, to quote Matt, then why the fuck did he ask it?
He probably intended to put a /sarcasm in there.
I'm thinking of the immortal words of Socrates, who said, "I drink what?"
Okay,
got a quote.
This is a good one. Here's a good question. This is from David. Let me just paste it over here before it disappears. What do you do if you become aware that the person you are speaking with actually suffers from a real psychiatric condition, borderline, schizophrenic, etc.?
That's an easy question. You stop the conversation. And I read about that in my book. If people have mental health issues, and again, we can parse this out. This is a whole conversation for another day. It's been argued that many people who have mental health issues go into religion because it's a safe space to them to misappropriate that term. But you just stop the conversation. You do not have the conversation with someone who has mental health issues. Unless you're a certified professional in dealing with people who have mental health issues.
Somebody's asking for some more detail about aftercare. You seem to get really excited about that, Pete, when it came up. What's your idea of it?
I think it's the missing piece. I think it's one of the missing pieces. We need to. I've actually thought about writing a whole book about it, but I think avenues for getting those ideas out there could possibly be. There are other venues that might be more productive. But the problem is right now, what do people do once we've helped them overcome delusions?
They go back to their communities.
Yeah, and then their communities deepen or entrench them in those delusions. And so we need an efficient network or a system or something to help people who have, that really is the missing piece of the secular project. That's it.
I think religion is, I won't argue that it's necessarily complete in entirely filling that gap, but I don't see any reason that it couldn't be expanded And I would think that generally they would be willing to expand to cover those areas where there's gaps. I think one of the big things is when people find their way out of religion, and not everybody does. I mean, some of you were atheists pretty much your entire life, so it's not as traumatic. But they've potentially lost their entire social network, and we haven't built up communities that give them a safe landing place. They may not need to go, see a therapist, or they may not need to go to recovering religion, but they need people to interact with. And that's why, for years when I was president of the atheist community of Austin, I kept saying the most important word in the name is community.
Yeah.
This needs to be whatever the members need it to be.
Yeah, and I think when you look at all the studies of the alleged benefits of religiosity, when you really take a look at the methodology and parse out that data, those studies, and there's some really good stuff that just come down the pike right now about drug and alcohol addiction. People who are, this is not my area, though my wife's an addiction medicine doc, and I read about it all the time, and I go to all these conferences. It's just fascinating to me. When you look at that, one of the risk factors, in criminology, it's called a criminogenic factor. In drug and alcohol, they have their own verbiage, but it's community support. And if you look at those studies in which people experience benefits from religiosity, those benefits are from community. And I'm extraordinarily skeptical if there's something about the content of the belief which confers a particular advantage on people, a health, that certain beliefs are more salubrious. But I really do think that is where we need to put our energy. And for example, many of the people, and this doesn't always work, obviously, but one of the things I do is I invite people to do jiu-jitsu with me, or I invite people to, go with me to introduce them in the gym. My gym is almost exclusively hardcore atheists. So I invite people to engage in activities with me. Oh, actually, Anthony, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. Once the focus leaves the afterlife, all that's left to focus on is this life, as it should be. And so what does this life have to offer? It has to offer jiu-jitsu and literature and music and sports and sex and everything else that there is. And so finding communities, I think, is therapeutic in its own. Finding something to be passionate about in this life, I think, is therapeutic and enlightening and healing in its own.
I see. I'm sorry.
I think my favorite answer along the lines of this, actually comes from Dennis Lubay, who was in here a little while ago. I saw him.
Oh, no kidding.
Asked him, well, when you get rid of religion, what do you replace it with? And he said, well, when you cure the cancer, what do you replace it with? When you get rid of these false proclamations about truth that have been poisoning people, I mean, right to the how do you deal with death? Religion has built up a fictional account of death and dying that they then become the only solution for. And if you change from the beginning of someone's life how they view death and dying as a natural part of this life, and how they, what's that?
You're absolutely correct. That's just spot on.
There you go. You heard it from himself. I'm absolutely correct. I have nothing more to say.
Okay, so Matt, real quick, you mentioned debating. Do you have any plans to debate William Lane Craig? And then I have a couple of questions that I'll lump together for one for Peter.
So somebody's going to need to ask William Lane Craig that. I would happily debate him. Actually, the only gigs I'm not turning down whenever I'm asked is a debate. I would debate every single day. And it's not just because it's not about, I'm so much smarter or showing who's right. It's about getting a structured conversation out there that other people can watch. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to watch this conversation. And, it's what I enjoy doing, and it's actually been pretty decent. Now, Craig was in Dallas at the Beer and Bible Consortium and was asked if he knew who I was, and he does, and whether or not he would debate me, and he said he wouldn't commit to a debate. Now, that's entirely his prerogative. I understand, he can't take every debate that's going on, but at this point, I think he's just ducking me, and that's fine, because there's plenty of other people out there to have debates with.
Is it worth debating somebody that would say, that has said, that they'd still believe even if there was evidence to the contrary?
Oh, yes, because that's one of the first things that you mentioned. Of course it's worth debating them. See, when debate opponents, And I greatly respect some of the people that I've had debates with, and I get along and we're friendly. But the purpose of the debate for me in those public formal debates, I want to show everybody why what they're saying is wrong. And the more obviously wrong it is, the better. So when somebody gets up there and says there's nothing that will change their mind, and they would believe even in the absence of any supporting evidence and in the face of evidence to the contrary, that is exactly what you target. You can, the ontological argument, the teleological argument, the cosmological argument, none of this is new. There's absolutely nothing new. Theologians aren't experts on God. They're experts on what other theologians have said. And so into the echo chamber that they're getting a feedback loop that allows them to say things that are so obviously wrong, they like serve it up on a platter. Watch a recent debate I did with Eric Hernandez, where he says that he advocates for a path to knowledge that doesn't require verification.
Oh boy.
I did a spit take with my Coke, and that lives forever in that debate, and I don't even have to comment on it.
I'll have to look that one up. Hey, maybe our guys can find the link to that. Eric Hernandez? Was that just a few months ago?
It was last month.
Okay. Pete, couple questions here for you.
Yeah,
Will you elaborate on it?
I'm about ready to pass out.
Okay. We'll let you go after this. Thank you for sticking around too.
Yeah.
So pleasant talking to you.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks, Josh.
Will you elaborate on any conversation? Or argument in which you truly felt it was unproductive? And the other question is, can you tell us when you had an argument that truly had you left at odds with the opposition? So tell us about a time where you had an extremely unproductive argument and you were completely left at odds with the person that you had been speaking with. Has it ever happened?
Yeah, it's happened. This gets back to the question about if someone has a psychiatric illness or a psychological disorder. I took my lunch. It was a gorgeous day, and I took my lunch at Portland State to the park blocks, and I was listening to the preacher, the street preacher, and I started to engage him. And maybe he was totally rational for like a minute in the conversation, and then he just went berserk. He just started screaming at me. I mean, he just literally, almost from where the term berserk comes from. So to say the least, it left me at odds, and I just instantly walked away. And I think that there's absolutely no shame if you, not only is there no shame, that's the right thing to do, because that's an important question, by the way. What do you do if you feel threatened or bullied, or there could be imminent physical harm, or you could be making someone's epistemic situation worse? What you should do is you should just walk away.
And this also applies. This also applies when you realize that you're out of your depth. If you're, not everybody is equipped to have every single conversation. You don't owe anybody an argument or an explanation for anything. And if they're not willing, if you say, hey, that's a good point, let me think about that and get back to you, and they're not willing to do that, they're not interested in truth or conversation. They're looking for a win, and fuck them.
Yeah. Great question here.
So that's the other piece of it. I actually like talking to people when they tell me that they believe in talking snakes. Matt, you've mentioned several times your debates. My debate in Brisbane, was it Brisbane? No, it was my debate in Perth. A very nice gentleman. We've corresponded on email afterwards. Subsequent Dr. Loke, really nice guy. Our worldviews couldn't be further apart. He believes in talking snakes. I do not believe in talking snakes. Thought I should make that clear for the record. But it's very easy to have a discussion with someone when they're being sincere. I appreciate that. And that's the problem. Matt, I'm still kind of picking myself up the floor when you mentioned the Young Turks. That's part of the problem with engaging people who are not sincere. And that's why I think I responded to Joshua's statement perhaps more intensely than I should have. It's that I see that, and I'm involved in that now in academia, in the academic landscape. And I see so many people who are just simply insincere, and they're arguing for positions that they could not, they're just insincere is the bottom line. And the talking snake people, there's something sincere about them. I like these people. I like having beers with them. I like they come to my talk, they ask questions, we go on afterwards. And there's just something about that that's refreshing to me.
And let me help pick you up off the floor really quickly. When I mentioned Young Turks, I was talking about video production quality.
value.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Not their content,
I know, but just that whole hit job that they did. Yeah, that whole hit job that they did on Sam was just so. I mean, it was
unbelievable.
That's another show we should do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we even got a question regarding our opinions on what Sam's been through.
They did. I closed it because I thought that was just a huge can of worms. But I'd love to do that again. It seems like we're all having fun and we're staying 30 minutes after, so that's a good sign. What is it going to take? I'll ask you, Joshua. What is it going to take before people en masse become more candid about their beliefs, or perhaps even their non-belief?
I think whatever it should have taken has already taken place. I mean, we live in a world where governments are influenced by people's faith, where governments are created and caliphates are created by people's faith. We deal with the benefits and the destructive qualities of what people believe, and certainly what they don't believe, on a daily basis. It's headline news constantly. And so if we can't talk about maybe perhaps not what a faith is or where it comes from, more along the lines of street epistemology's reasoning, but if we certainly can't talk about the results of faith candidly and what faith makes people do and what they're capable of with it, what a license from God is demonstrable of in this world, then we've lost the purpose of that discussion to begin with, in my opinion.
Wow, there's some great questions here. Okay. Damn. There's some good stuff here. Okay. Everyone, please express your strongest criticism of each other. Let's limit it. I hate to pick on one person.
Matt,
Peter's prettiness makes me feel inferior.
Let me start. I was going to. You guys have been going first all night long. Joshua, you use big words.
What?
Use big words.
Okay.
What is the purpose of offering a criticism? Like, what would the why
to divide us, to ruin the vibe that we're having?
But why would we want to do that? Now, so here's a possible way to reframe that question. Are there any ideas of one of the people here? Do you have I'm sorry, I'm just so tired right now. Do you have a substantive disagreement with any of the ideas of people here? It's just a weird question. Like, I don't think
reality TV.
I don't think that way about anybody else in life. Why am I going to think it about my buddies? It just doesn't make sense.
See, my thing is,
so there's my criticism of Peter, that you overthink things. And Matt, I don't have anything right now, but I have to think about it.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much. No, I think if we had legitimate criticisms, I am confident that, and I know that I've disagreed with every single person in the movement, prominent or not, including myself. Okay? That's what happens when people change minds. And I care far more about how we disagree than that we disagree.
Absolutely.
Most of the time. There are a couple of exceptions, because there are a couple of people who are just, I think, genuinely terrible on enough issues that I just don't have any interest in interacting with them. But no, that would be like a, hey, look how cool I am story. I've had conversations with people that everybody would recognize where I've changed their mind on significant things, and they have changed my mind on significant things. I'm more optimistic. Even if somebody, I think they're dead wrong and they're doing harm, I'm more optimistic that they're going to change their mind if there's a track record of them being reasonable in conversation. It just may take some time. It may take a different
time. Can I add a word to that, Matt? Civil.
Well,
civil.
Now we're back to Engage versus Enrage.
Yeah, and I think Jamie Ian Swiss and I have had discussions about this. I think that and we do have a substantive disagreement. When we interviewed Ryan Bell for A Year Without God, Jamie's interview was much different from mine, to say the least. I think that, and I'm not at all pinning this on Jamie, because I do think that he's very forthright and people mistake that for something else. But there has been so much incivility among atheists that we need to we really need to think about how we're engaging each other, because it's been profoundly unproductive. Even if Joshua had a issue, if I had some issue with Joshua, the first order of business that I would do is I would email him and say, hey, you said this, could you explain this to me, because this is how I took it, and then we could go from there. But this idea, this weird thing that you take these private you take some perceived grievance and then you put it on Twitter, or you slander the person, or you call them a racist or a bigot. The whole thing is just an anathema to have any productive truth-seeking dialectic at all. And with that,
I recall.
I'm sorry. I was just.
I recall a conversation with Pete. I recall a phone conversation where you had said or done something that I disagreed with or had issue. And what did I do? I picked up the phone and I called you and we talked about it, and that was it. We moved on.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I wish more people did that in this movement.
That's the way it should be.
Why don't more people do that in this movement? What's the deal?
They don't have Pete's phone number like I do.
Can I ask a question? Can I
Everybody's
ask a
reachable
question
these
just for
days.
thought's sake?
Sure.
It makes sense that you do this with you guys, and I think that's fantastic. I mean, that's perfect, and it's exactly as it should be. Would you still do this with, say, Jerry Falwell Jr., given his recent remarks?
Oh,
Or would you-
absolutely.
Fill us in on what the remarks were.
The question to me is, if I may, Joshua, the question to me is not whether or not I would do this to Jerry Falwell Jr. or what have you, or a guy from I was going to say Ku Klux Klan. I mean, there are different degrees of approach. The current manifestation or the current incarnation of what I consider to be perhaps among the biggest threats today are the regressive left.
Sure.
These people, which I would have to marshal all of my emotional forces to really to do my best to listen and be open-minded and be sincere, knowing almost inevitably that no matter any question that you ask, you will be smeared as a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, a misogynist, even if the conversation has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So I think that these are all kind of manifestations of a type of sickness, of a type of irrationality. And with that, gentlemen, I hate to leave you, but I am so tired. I'm about ready to pass out.
Yep.
So it's been
Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And thank you all for what you do. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete.
A couple questions here. This would be a good one for you, Matt. Is watching two people in a street epistemology type conversation too boring for a mass audience? Is there entertainment value in watching two people respectfully talk to each other?
Well, I would think this would be a better question for you.
I agree.
I think there is a market for it. I think that the people that are used to watching an aggressive atheist tear down a street preacher, there's certainly a place for it, and I think people are drawn to the conflict there. But I think when people grow out of that, when they mature a little bit and they realize that it's not effective, then I think they will migrate to the more civil approach. I see that happening, and I hear that just like you get emails, Matt. You know, I get comments and emails and people saying, watching you have a civil conversation with somebody for 5 minutes or 30 minutes, it's changed the way that I want to talk to those people. I'm done with the debates. I'm done with the arguing. They don't get you anywhere. So I do think that there's a market for it. But when I look at my video views, and that's probably not the best way to determine this, but I'll get 1,000 views of a beautiful conversation, but there's a brawl between an atheist and a theist going on, and that'll get 100,000 views, and it's discouraging. Now, here's the question. If more people are watching that, you potentially are changing more minds. You're reaching a wider audience, and it may not be as effective, but you're affecting more people because you're getting their attention from the start. So I do think there's a market for it, but it has an uphill road to climb because it's competing against the marketplace of entertainment and conflict and ideas.
You had said something earlier that I kind of disagree with. It's not a big deal, but you had talked about if somebody engages in a conversation and you see them react negatively, that you think it might be because they've had a conversation with an atheist prior to you that was antagonistic. I don't think I could actually reach that conclusion. I think that there's been enough poisoning of the well from the pulpit about who we are that there's a kind of a knee-jerk fear reaction to just, oh my God, it's xenophobic. You know, I'm talking to an atheist. What do I do? You know, what do I do now?
Yeah, true.
Suspicion, nothing like that. Rather than, because I think a lot of them who had had a conversation with some, you know, asshole atheist previously, you'd see more of a smug, here it comes, and I'm going to get to call you out on that. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing, but I have said for years, and I stand by it. You know, we talked about the Socratic method. We can talk about, you know, Pete's book. I'm convinced. Not only is there no silver bullet argument, there's no silver bullet method. People believe for different reasons. They're going to give it up for different reasons. And that's why you can put up a clip of me that looks like I'm doing street epistemology, or it looks like that I'm being the kindest individual you've ever seen. And you can also find clips of me where it looks like I'm a fucking monster. And
same with me.
Sometimes those are both can be great, and sometimes those can both be a mistake. And if I have any advantage, because I don't have the greatest vocabulary, I don't have the best credentials in the world, I've just been doing this a long time, and I lived it for 25 years. If I'm talking to a Christian, it's very hard for them to paint me as the elitist, intellectual, erudite snob who has always hated religion, because I lived it. And to the extent that I have any expertise, I think it might be in taking more complicated, complex philosophical topics and distilling them down to where anybody could understand it, or almost anybody, because that's what I had to do for me to understand it. And so you'll see me try whatever method that works. And if something is just, if the feedback I'm getting from a particular thing is overwhelmingly negative, then it gets jettisoned. But there are moments where, just like Stephen Fry has this great short video, you can look it up on YouTube, where he's talking about swearing and how, you know, sometimes it's exactly the right thing to do. And, you know, for people who say it's superfluous, well, you know, fuck them. I think that the methodology, the tactics that we choose to use, I don't know. I don't see the justification for limiting yourself and putting yourself in any one box. I think you constantly have to adjust to your audience, to the situation, and then do the hard part of going back and looking what you did, thinking about what you did, and finding better ways to do it. When I leave the TV show for the drive home or the drive to dinner, I replay the show in my head. I'm going, oh crap, I should have said that, or oh, that was so much better argument, I should have done that, or I really like that one, file that away. And that's why I don't like, I've done debates. I'm not suggesting anybody else do this. I've done debates where I have done absolutely no preparation other than writing my opening statement on the flight to the debate. Because this is a conversation, you know, this particular topic, and I know the individual, and I know what's going on, and I know what I want to say, and I live in the back and forth, you know, questioning period. I don't want to go in and read to people. But maybe there's a time and a place for reading to people. Maybe it's the best thing you can do. So in a situation, so I'm reluctant to say that there's a best way, because people aren't the same.
There's a toolkit. So Joshua, there's a question here, and it's from a Christian, and he was on our Blab that I'm on a Blab with a guy named James Probst, and he came on and he had a quote. He said during the conversation that we were having, doubt is an invitation to know truth. So I immediately had to tweet that. And he's asking a question here now. He says, I'm a Christian. If you could recommend one book for me to read, what would it be?
The cute answer would be the Bible. I mean, and I know that it's now a little worn off with age, but look, there is no origin of an opinion I had about the Christian faith that didn't spawn from my own reading, my own interpretation, my own study of the Bible. If doubt, what was the quote again?
His quote is, doubt is an invitation to know truth. Doubt is an invitation to know truth.
Exactly. If doubt is an invitation to know truth, and I think that's beautifully phrased and ironically true, then the best thing you can do is advocate for your own knowledge. The best thing you can do is go to the source, consider it yourself. And so if if I am to recommend any book to a Christian who is open to having their minds changed about their fundamental tenets, the only reasonable and responsible suggestion is to go review your fundamental tenets. Don't read Dawkins, though that won't hurt. Don't read Hitchens, though that won't hurt. Or Peter, for that matter. It'll certainly invoke new ideas and require to ask new questions. But if doubt's the fundamental provocateur, then read your own book again and again and again and again. And if you find a new affirmation, then there's nothing any other book is going to do different to change your mind. And if you find something worth doubting in there, then you've begun the process that you admit yourself is a path to enlightenment.
Book recommendations, Matt?
I think the book that I probably recommend most often when somebody doesn't give me this is the topic I'd like to research, what would you recommend, is a book called Innumeracy by John Allen Paulus. It's short, it's a quick read, it talks about how bad we are at numbers and statistical analysis and analyzing risks. And reading that book, I read it every couple of years since I first read it, just to remind myself of how absolutely good it is and how absolutely bad we are at certain things because we're good at it. Because we're good at living life by inference and induction, we overemphasize how good we are at it. And to not be so in love with an idea just because you had it, and to recognize how often you're wrong, which is way more than any of us ever estimated.
You did a video recently, or maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago, about chance and the odds. What are the odds? I think was the video. Maybe the guys can pull that up. That was a great one.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, another one for Matt. Would you elaborate on delving into Matt Slick's tag argument? Are you tackling... he's a presuppositionalist, is he not?
So I just replied to that actually in chat.
Sorry, missed it. Okay.
Yeah, it's all right. So going into detail on the whole thing between me and Matt Slick and his tag argument would take way more. Like I've got maybe 10 minutes.
It seems like you've addressed that on the Atheist Experience every once in a while too.
I have, and I'll be doing a debate review of mine and Matt Slick's last debate, the one we did on the Bible Thumping Wingman, probably in a couple months. So
is it negative to proselytize for critical thinking? So I think that begs the definition of proselytizing, which I'll read here. The official definition of proselytize is to convert or attempt to convert someone from one religion, belief or opinion to another. Are we proselytizing for atheism? I get that all the time.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you, Matt, please.
So everybody thought I was going to be a preacher, including me, and I am. I've self-labeled on occasion for amusement as an evangelical atheist, but if I am actually a preacher or an evangelical anything, it is on behalf of skepticism and then humanism and then atheism, because atheism is a conclusion. It's not like I'm going out trying to make the world atheist. I'm trying to help the world be rational and be humanists. Or at least humane to each other in some sense. So I got no problem with people saying, yeah, Matt's a preacher. He's an evangelical, and then insert skeptic or humanist, but not so much atheist. I mean, that just happens to be where I focus the most, is on the religious issues.
I couldn't have said it better. There's no point in making an addendum to that.
I'd like to add just one thing. I don't go out to proselytize or tell somebody what to think about atheism. I want to understand why people believe what they believe. However, when I give a talk about street epistemology, I suppose in a way I'm proselytizing for this different way of the Socratic method and talking about it. So if I'm proselytizing to anybody, it's other non-believers to look at this other tool that's in the arsenal, that's in the toolkit available to us.
Yep.
Okay.
Suppose one more question, perhaps?
Yeah, it's getting kind of late.
Applause now, Joshua.
And yeah, we should probably just wrap it up. Let's do, I think we're kind of running out of questions here. We've been blowing through them.
I saw one pop up that I wouldn't mind hitting.
Go for it.
Are there arguments that atheists shouldn't use?
Oh, I had that written down. I forgot to mention that. That was a great question. Yeah. What do you think, Matt?
So recently I did a video called something like The Bible Doesn't Say That, where I addressed a couple of these. But my biggest pet peeves are people who try to equate religious belief with mental illness. that would be another 30-minute conversation, or probably a 30-minute rant on my part about just how absolutely wrong that is. But one of the things is that people
It's a shame Peter isn't here to weigh in on this.
People tend to overreach, and I know a number of people, including some people I know very well, who don't know a whole lot about the doctrine. Pick one, Christianity. They don't know a whole lot about the Bible, and so, but they think they do. And so somebody emailed me just the other day, and they're like, "Oh, hey, here in Luke, Jesus says, bring my enemies before me and slaughter them." Well, he's speaking as a king in a parable. It would be like me saying, "And then Lord Voldemort said, bring him here and kill him in front of me." So you don't get to necessarily credit that to Jesus. But you have to understand that first before you can get to the fact that Jesus is putting himself, or God, in the position of that king in the parable. So in a sense, he kind of really is saying that. It's just in a metaphoric sense rather than a literal sense, although you can argue that God's going to literally kill everybody. But the big thing is, it's much better to ask them to tell you what they believe and why than it is to try to tell them what they believe. And there's a number of mistakes get made. And I see people saddling Protestants with Catholic dogma because they've heard, the Catholics think the cracker turns into the body of Christ, and then they'll meet a Baptist and go, oh, you guys think it turns into the body of Christ. And the Baptist's like, as soon as that happens, they get to dismiss you and everything you say.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand what you're talking about, yet you're willing to do so. And you've just put up what may be an impenetrable roadblock to success by showing that you're willing to stand there and talk about shit you don't know.
I want to echo Matt's first point about the comparison of faith to mental illness, because I want to do it personally, because I know it's a mistake I've made in the past. Not to the greatest extent, not to the most vile extent, but there are parallels that I've highlighted that weren't necessarily true, and probably a little underhanded. So I appreciate that that's a tactic that we should refrain from, for sure. And secondly, I feel that any dead-end argument a theist used to support their claim, the atheist shouldn't use to refute them. There are a couple of really notable exceptions. The more witty, the more clever, the more effective usually. Bertrand Russell's teapot is an excellent example. This whole position of prove it doesn't exist.
Effective in what way?
I mean, to say effective rhetorically, or that it changes minds, or that it garners points in a debate, or applauses on a blab, however you choose to measure it. But
you're winning, by the way.
Oh yeah, actually, to be fair, I think my roommate and some friends have formed a coup, and
I don't know. I got Lalo in my corner.
Launched an applause assault on us. But I'm saying is that if you ever hear a theist that is using a dead end argument in support of their position, it's best not to mock them just with the antithetical that doesn't illuminate anything. And Bertrand Russell's teapot is an excellent example of how it can be done effectively. But prove that I can't. Prove that I can't shoot laser beams out of my eyes is in some ways stops the argument more than accelerates it. But it can be done, like Bertrand Russell proves. It can be done successfully at times, but rarely, commonly. Well done.
Go ahead, Matt. It looked like you were about to bounce out of your seat there.
No, it dovetailed into something, when I was debating Cy, and people would be like, one of his common questions is, is there anything that can you identify anything you know? And they were like, well, I know I'm not omniscient. And first of all, that if it were good, if it were, reasonable, that would be a pretty good response that would shut down. The problem is that it's just wrong. So you wouldn't necessarily know that whether or not you were omniscient.
Are precepts the one group of believers that don't warrant a discussion, or are they still worth it?
Okay, so time for a moment of brutal honesty. Sometimes my debate opponents are people I actually like and appreciate and am optimistic that they might change their mind, and I am willing to have a conversation with them because I think good points can be made. And other times my debate opponents have been people who I don't have any confidence can remotely be reasonable, and I'm using them as an example to show the absurdity of their positions. Precepts almost always fall into the latter category.
Well said.
Elegantly phrased.
I had a question here. I'd like to hear a discussion about street epistemology and how the word disingenuous applies at some point. Joshua, how is SE disingenuous?
It's disingenuous in the same way proselytization for atheism as a phrase is disingenuous. That is to say, SE is it's designed to bring the person who's engaging with it to a more open frame of mind to discuss what hopefully the objective is truth. And I've heard you use that expression in a lot of your videos. Don't you want to know things that are true? The only way that it could possibly be disingenuous is that the assumption's already a given that what is truth is that there are no gods. And so in some ways, the dialectical framework is designed to lead people with whom you're discussing to that assumption. That's not to say it is disingenuous in truth or in reality, and I certainly want to go down to this point too far without Peter here. I think that would be unfair. But I think that in the way this question is framed, you could say that there's a facet of disingenuity, just disingenuousness, about the dialectical process, because it's not really intended to open up everyone who's engaged thought process into what is true. It's intended to make people who believe doubt their faith and there accept the alternative, which is that maybe not faith is the right answer. That's the only way it could be perceived as disingenuous.
It sounded like you were saying that if I don't believe in a God, it would be disingenuous to have a conversation with somebody that does.
It would. Let me put it this way. If I believed in God, I could ask you the same question and use the same rhetorical framework to try to get you to believe what I think, rather than what is objectively true.
Okay, so a minute ago you mentioned that it presumes that the truth is that there are no gods, and I don't think that's what it presumes at all. I think it presumes that the truth is... I say it may be seen that it could presume. Hopefully that's what I said, because that's what I meant.
Because I try to be very clear that I'm open to believing what they believe if they have a good reason for it.
Yeah. So I'm always...
That's the key difference there, where I think it doesn't qualify as being disingenuous. If you're honestly willing to change your mind to believe that karma is real, or a pagan goddess exists, or Jesus rose from the dead, then I think the topic is fair game.
Well, I agree with you 1,000%. To be clear, the question that was asked was, in what way can the word disingenuousness be used in relation to SE? And you asked me to provide an answer, and I think that from the framework of that question, that's the only way it could be reasonably assumed.
You weren't necessarily taking the position of that.
No, because I don't necessarily take the position that SE is disingenuous. I do take the position that SE has logical and social flaws. I think that it's nuanced and complicated. I don't think, as Matt said, that there is a silver bullet methodology, and SE certainly falls into that. But in relation to the question as was asked, I think that's the only way you could presume disingenuousness about the process.
So I guess we could say it's disingenuous to say that SE is necessarily disingenuous.
And that's a wrap.
That's a perfect point to end it on. You guys, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and taking time out of your week. And I think the guys in the chat and everyone watching, we'll go ahead and try to get this out to the guests on the show, the raw video, so they can do it with it whatever they want. And damn it, I'd love to do another one of these. This was fun.
Anytime.
I'd be happy to. I'm going to be gone pretty much out of pocket until January 3rd, but since I'm traveling less next year, I'd be happy to come back and do some more. This was fun.
Let's do it.
Thanks for introducing me to the Blab data, because I might use this for other stuff.
It's addicting. Just be warned. Just be warned. You'll be up at 3 a.m. on it. It's really addicting. Okay, guys. Thank you, and thank you everyone for watching. Joshua, you want to stick around? Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for the questions.
All right, that was fun.